So in this video, we're going to talk about how you can build a frequency chart and a histogram in two different ways. So this is going to go alongside OpenStax statistics. I am going to be working out of a free Excel workbook. You can find a link to it in the description. You can access the OpenStax text for free. You can find a link to it in the description in the video. And then the Excel is free. You can either look in the description of the video or you can go to divideandconquermath.com and then just go to the OpenStax statistics section. Okay, folks, so I'm not going to lie to you. This is a little tricky. And so we have the quick way and then we have the thorough way, but the thorough way is going to take longer. And there's actually several ways to do this, but all of them take quite a bit of time. So just letting you know, it's going to be a longer video. So the idea behind this, first of all, is for way one. So we're going to make a frequency chart. So the idea behind frequency is that you have a set of data. So you see I have this data here. And we're going to basically create some like bins to categorize the data into. So for instance, there's a lot of different ways that we can make bins. So I could have everything from like 7 to 7.9, and then everything after that could be in the next bin. Or I could have everything from 0 to 2. So you see I have all these decimal points in here. And so for my frequency, I basically want to like create a category of where the data values should go in, and then I want to count them up. Now, the idea is that right now we have a really small list of data, but we want to be able to do this in such a way so that if we had, say, like thousands of pieces of data, we would be able to replicate this technique. It's the same technique. Okay, so first of all, to do this, you need to be able to access the data analysis tool. So we can check really quickly if you have that. So the data analysis tool is found under data, and then you go to data analysis, and most people don't have this when they open Excel. So we've got to first just turn that on. So to do that, I have some directions in here, and I'm not going to take up the time in the video, but these directions tell you exactly where you need to do all that. So you can just follow those directions. Pause here if you need to access the data analysis, just follow those directions. So once you see that you have data analysis here, now we can work on the pieces that we need for this. So we need to create some different bins to place our data into. And so we can't do that without knowing a few other pieces of information. So I have a little cheat sheet over here. So we're going to start by computing the minimum and the maximum data value. So the minimum data value function is just min. So I'm going to type in equals min. And then I'm going to just select this data here. And I'm going to close this parenthesis. And okay, so there we go. Now, I actually am going to also tell you a sweet shortcut so that you don't have to sit here and scroll every single time like I just did. So let's do this for max. So I'm going to type in max. Okay, so the keyboard shortcut, this is pretty sweet. This is for a Windows. You're going to have to Google what the equivalent of this is for a Mac. I'm not sure. But so I click on the starting number. So notice how I have equals max, and then I've started with that starting number. So now that this is like got a blinking cursor on it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Ctrl+Shift+Down, and you'll notice that Excel auto selects all of the data that it wants me to use, and then I can just close that parenthesis. So I can show you that one more time. I'll do it with the minimum function. So if I do min, so I click on the first number that I want to use and then Ctrl+Shift+Down, and then I can just close the parenthesis. So that's a really handy trick so that you're not sitting there like scrolling and selecting all this data, just pointing that out. Okay, so now that I know the minimum and the maximum, I'm going to talk about the range. So the range is found by taking just the highest minus the lowest value. So we have a range of 9.2. Okay, so in this case, we are going to do this by creating 6 bins. And the only reason we're creating 6 bins is because I made up a number. So I've got create 6 bins for the data. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to determine what is the proper width of my bins. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take that range. This is the total range of the values, and then I'm going to divide it by, well, let's see, by, I guess 5 separations would give me 6 bins. So I can divide this by 5. So the bin width is going to be 1.84 for each bin. Now, the other thing about this is that you don't want Excel to get confused about the minimum and the maximum values and where those should go. So you always want to make your starting point for your bins you want to make it just slightly below what your minimum value is. So in this case, since my minimum value is 0.1, I am going to start this at 0. So that's just a little bit below my minimum value. So there's no like hard and fast rule of what to select for your minimum value. It's just whatever makes sense to you in that context. So in this case, I'm just going to start this at 0. Okay, so now that I've got my starting point and I know the width of my bins, I can now start to define my bin width. Okay, so I'm going to start this at 0. So let's see, I'll just type in a 0 here to start. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 0 and I'm going to add on to it my bin width, which is right over here. Now, you might remember in other exercises we've talked about locking cells, so this is a great idea to lock a cell. And so you can see now that I've also built this formula here that references the previous entry, and then we'll add on 1.84. So let's see, if I drag this down, what do I get? So I go from 1.84 to 9.2. Okay, so let's see if this does what we need it to do, okay? So let's now actually use our data analysis tool. So once you have these bins set, so you'll see what this does in a second. So you might not know, like, wait, what does all this mean? It'll be easier to understand it after we get the example going. So, okay, so I'm gonna now click over here on data analysis, and I'm gonna go into, see, you have all of these different tools that you can use in here. And I'm gonna go into this one that says histograms. I'm gonna hit OK. And so the nice thing is, so data analysis can be used in a lot of different ways. And it's nice because it gives you these nice prompts of what you want to do. So your input range is always referring to your data. So what I can do is I can click on my data. I can use that keyboard shortcut again. After I click on the first data point, I can go Ctrl+Shift+Down, and I can do it that way, or I can just select all my data points, whatever you want to do. So there's my data points. And then it's asking for your bin range. So where are your bins? Now, the other thing that it's asking for is, did you select the labels? So I started my selection at A2, so I didn't select this number of hours on social media. If you selected this and the bin width, then you just want to check labels. So if you included the labels, check labels. If you didn't, don't include labels. Okay, and now it's going to ask for output options. So it's going to do all of this math for us, and it wants to know where should I put this output. So I always do, these are talking about doing new worksheets or new workbooks. I want this to stay on the same page, so I always select output range. And then I have this little green cell here, so we're just going to paste everything in there. And let's check cumulative percentage and chart output just to see what we get. So now that I've done all of this, I can hit OK. And so now that I've hit OK, so this is kind of interesting. So what this is doing now is this is now taken the bins that we have defined, and it's got a couple of categories in here. So what do and you can see now it's done our frequency, and then it's also got a cumulative frequency. So what do these bins actually mean? So I'm going to move this histogram out of the way. We'll talk about it in a second. So the bins now are helping us figure out the width of each category, I guess. So at 0, this means any data points below 0. And we know, since the minimum data point started at 0.1, remember when we did this? So we know that there are no data points below 0, so this is fine. So next, this is going to be referring to all the data points between 0 to 1.84. So that's this width, that's this category. This is going to be everything after 1.84 to 3.68. This is going to be 3.68 to 5.52, 5.52 to 7.36, 7.36 to 9.2, and then this is going to be 9.2 plus. And we know that there should be one data point in this, right? Because we know 9.2 was the highest, or we have this 9.3 was our highest data point, so it makes sense that we have that. And so from here, so now this basically created our own frequency table for us. Now, I will say this is not the only way to create a frequency table. There are several ways, but you have to kind of go through and you have to define all of these bins. And then from this frequency table, so you can see that Excel also made this histogram using those bin widths, and then it's made bars for the frequency. So a histogram is really just a bar chart for your frequency. We could think of it like that. And so that's what it's done. But you'll notice that the way that the bins are named, you have to remember, like, this is the interpretation of it. So this part right here in the yellow, this is the thing that it means. So you have to kind of interpret that for Excel. So it's one thing that I like to do sometimes is I like to recreate my frequency table with the relevant data. So I'm going to take those labels, and then, so there was nothing below 0, so I'm just going to take these here, and I'm just going to paste them together, and I'm going to make their own cute little frequency table. And let's see, I'll copy bin and frequency. Let's see, I'll move this down here, make this all green. I'll make it look all pretty. Okay. So I like to, when I make a frequency table, I like to make it something that actually makes sense, because the output that Excel has, it's just not like friendly to look at. And also other things to keep in mind here. So if you wanted to restart this, so let's say that you wanted to change your bin width, maybe you wanted to change your bin width to like 1.9. So this would be all well and good. If you change it to 1.9, all of these bins here are going to change. And then you can just rerun the data analysis. So if I were to rerun the data analysis, so just note what's going to happen. So let's see if I go to data analysis. So I'm going to start the whole thing over. So I still got the same data and the same bins selected. So I'm going to keep my output still at the same. So everything's going to be the same. So watch what happens if I just try to run everything the exact same. It's going to give me this message that your output's going to overwrite existing data. Press OK to overwrite that data. So if I want to rerun something from data analysis, I just have to be careful. And this is totally a thing of preference. So whether you want to write over this data or not, it just depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to compare different data sets, then you might want to paste it someplace else. In my case, I wanted to make new bins, so I'm just going to overwrite everything. And you can see here, so it actually has still my old graph on here, but now it also has this new graph. So I'm going to delete that one, and then I would have to redo all my frequencies. So now this goes from 0 to 1.9. So you can see that everything's a little bit different. And by shifting those bins, that shifted the way that we look at our data points. So it's just something to kind of play around with. And then you've got your histogram here. So it's one way that you can build frequency charts and that Excel will spit it out. Now, the other way 2, so we're going to go over to this other tab. So the question that you're trying to answer is really what's going to drive all of this. If all you need is a histogram, then there is a much faster way to do this. I can select all the data that I have, and I can go over here to insert, and then I can go over here into where it says statistics, and you can see here statistics has this histogram. So I can select here, or I can go into recommended charts. If I go into recommended charts, so I can see I've got, so actually in this case in my recommended charts, it's not showing me what I want. So when that happens, you can click here into all charts, and then again you can go back into, oh, there it says histogram. And you can click on histogram. Now, the thing about this particular histogram is that this does not look very usable because it only made 3 bins. So that is going to require me to format the chart a little bit. So if I go to Format Axis, so you can see here under the histogram, it has bin width, and I can change this bin width to whatever I want. So I'm going to change this bin width to 1.9. So now it has more data points in it. And from here, so I could also add data labels. So if I click on, and I have all these little bars selected, I can right click on them and I can click add data labels. And so this would be another way to kind of get to my frequency in a much faster way. So you can see now it's showing all the number of data points that fall into each category. And you can see here, it's like just auto set all the bin widths. So the unfortunate thing is, so if what you need is a chart, you need like a table of values, then Excel doesn't have a fast way to do that. If you just need a, so if you need a table of values, Excel can't do that quickly. If you just need a graph that you need to easily read off, you can do that pretty quickly with the histogram option in the insert area over here. And again, I went to recommended charts. Oops, I don't have any data selected. I went into recommended charts and then I went down to histogram. So those are two different ways to get histograms, and kind of like quick ways to get to frequency versus longer ways to build frequency. There's also a frequency formula. I've found that that's harder to use for students. So I think that these two methods will probably get you by with most things you need for the class.